Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is Verifying the Future, the Paxton Decision, Age Assurance, and the Next Phase of Online Safety. I'm Ashley Gold. I am the Senior Tech Policy Reporter at Axios. I've been coming to this conference for like 10 years now, and it's very interesting that everything is about AI now. But we're going to talk about some good bread and butter kids' online safety, content moderation, First Amendment issues as well. I'm going to let my panel take turns introducing themselves and telling you a little bit about their work and how it relates to the topic at hand. So go ahead.
Sure. My name is Sarah Scheffler. I'm an assistant professor at Carnegie Mellon University. I'm a computer scientist. I study privacy and cryptography, and I'm sure we'll be talking more about this later, but we've been looking a lot lately into user responses to age verification systems, and mostly looking at age verification systems and looking at differing completion rates, so how many users are turned away by different age verification systems, how comfortable are they with them, how effective do they think they are, stuff like this. I'm sure we'll dig into this more later.
My name is John Schweppe. I'm a senior advisor at American Principles Project. I just left the Federal Trade Commission, where I worked for Chairman Ferguson as an advisor on tech policy, consumer protection. This is an issue I've been working on for a very long time and care a lot about. Our group, American Principles Project, was involved in the states with a lot of these laws, and very excited to be here today.
Hi, I'm Ariel Fox Johnson. I'm here today for Common Sense Media, where I'm a senior advisor on data privacy. Common Sense is committed to helping ensure kids can thrive in this new world of apps and AI and algorithms. But Common Sense and I have worked for a long time on kids' privacy issues, COPPA for the last decade and a half or so, kids' privacy and safety in the States, and also the last couple of years gotten really focused on age assurance, as that's replaced a lot of discussions about what the knowledge standard should be. So looking forward to chatting today.
I'm Jessica Malugin. I'm from the Competitive Enterprise Institute, where I run tech policy. Happy to be here.
Thank you, everyone. So let's start by sort of defining the problem at hand. So when we talk about kids' online safety this year in our country, what do you think the main problems are that lawmakers in the states and on the federal level are actually trying to solve? And which of those are sort of real, tangible problems that you see today versus maybe sort of future casting? What could happen? Do you want to start, John?
Yeah, well, I think it obviously depends on where you are on the political spectrum, on what you focus on the most. But I think generally when you look at state laws, obscenity as to minors has obviously been a concern. Violence, age inappropriate, gore and bloodshed, exploitative advertising, messaging directly with adults, which obviously is something that for those of us who have kids, I mean, this is something that I think everybody's worried about. And I think the lawmakers are trying to solve for that. But the second issue I think that goes along with this is the parental rights aspect. And so there is a debate in this country over the degree to which parents should be able to direct, whether it's the education of their kids, the healthcare of their kids, and I think when it comes to using the internet, what their internet usage looks like. And so I think some of these laws get right at that.
I think also problems lawmakers are trying to solve are the nature of the sort of addictiveness of technology and algorithmic feeds and issues related to data collection and data privacy and profiling kids and whether that's going to label them or limit opportunities and these sort of like product features issues, and something now we're seeing with like AI chatbots, emotional attachments forming with kids and not even other people they're talking to on the internet, but machines they're talking to on the internet. So I think there's a whole panoply of problems, and age assurance comes up in a lot of different ways and a lot of different attempts to solve the problems.
What are they trying to solve for? Getting reelected? I kid. I think that's right. I mean, all the things they're saying. I think that there is right now what we can describe as a moral panic around kids and the internet. How much of that is scientifically based and how much of it is causal as opposed to correlative, I think are open questions right now. But I certainly think that the impulse to put parents in control as much of this as possible, who, by the way, I think are projecting a little bit of their own phone anxiety onto their kids right now because we're all on our phone too much. But I think that impulse to put parents in control is a good one. John and I probably disagree about the best way to do that, but I think that certainly, hopefully we can agree that parents know their kids best and making it as easy for parents to be in control of what their kids see and do. And every kid is different, and every age is different. And people just are going to be hurt or helped by different things online. And one of the concerns I have with all of the different things they're solving for is that there tend to be sort of these big one prescription top-down answers that I fear won't be as effective as everyone hopes they would be.
And tech policy often struggles with actually getting legislation done, specifically because the one size fits all does not fit different types of kids, different types of communities that might be gathering in different spaces online that need those spaces for different reasons. What are some actual workable solutions that you have seen out there? Or if there's been nothing good, what do you think is best for next steps of like bills that could actually pass or policies that states can start adopting?
I guess I'll say I think there's a distinction between bills that can actually pass and policies that I think
Right.
are a good idea. But I think policies that I think are a good idea are at a baseline protecting privacy. That can help with a lot of the follow-on problems, and we can maybe have fewer First Amendment debates about it. They're definitely not zero debates. Addressing specific design features like New York and California have addressed targeted algorithmic feeds. They're not prohibiting kids from being on social media, but they're limiting certain product features if you are a kid or teen on social media. So I think those are good ways to try to create a better environment, but not create like these black and white, you're online or you're offline, or you can be part of this or you can't be.
Anyone else?
Well, I'll just say states are really interesting. They're the laboratories of democracy. You're able to see and test a lot of these laws there and figure out what we should do nationally. But I do think, and certainly the president has articulated this, I think we do need a federal standard rather than a 50-state patchwork of kid safety laws. And that's certainly where I think Congress is starting to look. You've already had really great efforts that have come close with KOSA and COPPA 2.0 and some of these other bills. But you're seeing like the House Energy and Commerce Committee really committing to passing a suite of bills on age verification and that sort of thing. So I really do think, even though we talk a lot about how in Washington nothing ever gets done, I do think right now you're seeing Congress really prioritize this, and something could actually happen this year.
I guess I just also want to chime in and say on the technical methods side, like what kind of age assurance, what kind of age verification are we doing? You actually get some very different things. You get, are we showing a government-issued photo ID? Are we using AI to estimate one's age via biometric? Are we using behavioral signals? Are we using some other known system that knows that you are 18 in some other way? All of these things have different privacy implications, different security implications. So even if we are just saying, oh, okay, we're going to do age assurance or we're going to do age verification, that can actually end up looking very different depending on what particular thing that we're actually doing.
So let's talk a little bit about your study. It basically found that the more sort of stickiness or friction there is to get onto a platform because they want to test your age, people sort of abandon it and say, never mind, I'm not going to go on this website. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we ran a study in which we basically presented adults with a study which we said was about commenting on romantic media, and we are presenting the study participants with what they thought was an incidental age verification check that we had to do first. In reality, we just wanted to see how many people would actually do the age verification when we asked for different kinds of age verification. As a baseline, we did sort of the standard checkbox. We tested government ID upload. We tested AI age verification. We tested an email-based approach where we told people we would look them up in a database to see whether they were over the age of 18 based on their email. But in reality, this was just a simulated website that we gave them to see whether or not they would actually go through. And afterward, we followed up with a survey to ask what they thought about age verification. And actually, we got results that were pretty striking. 99% of people went through the checkbox. 20% of people went through the government ID upload. About 50% went through the AI facial age estimation, and about 85% went through the email lookup. So it was really quite different depending on what kind of age verification we asked for. Oh, we also did one that was government ID upload plus a liveness check video selfie, which had, I think, the lowest completion rate out of all of them. We also played around a little bit with reminding people that there was privacy here, reminding people this information is only going to be used for age verification, or we're going to delete your information when you're done. And this did not statistically significantly affect how many people went through the government ID conditions. We asked some follow-up questions about comfort, and actually, again, people were pretty uncomfortable with age verification. So across the whole, I think in every condition except the checkbox condition, more than half the participants said they were at least somewhat uncomfortable with the age verification method presented to them. And that's even true if you look at people who did complete the age verification. We also asked some questions about effectiveness. People were generally pretty skeptical. I believe none of the methods had more than half the users say, we think that this method is at least somewhat effective at keeping children from accessing the online content. Honestly, at least in the study that we did, we found a lot of discomfort. We found a lot of users predicting that this would be pretty ineffective and very low completion rates, especially for the government ID methods. And I should also say we have a write-up of this. And if you Google my name, Sarah Scheffler, when you go to my personal website, there is a link to a report that has more information about all of this. And I'm certainly happy to talk about it offline with anyone who wants to know.
Yeah, I mean, fascinating real world example of how age verification can be applied, whether people are willing to deal with it to get to the places online that they want. Okay, policy and lawyer folks, you have a data person telling you how this might actually work in practice. Any reactions to those results?
Let me actually say one more thing, which was that there were a few different reasons that people gave. Some people gave reasons of convenience. One person said in the follow-up survey, I don't want to turn on the lights. It's 2 a.m. I'm not going to do an age check at 2 a.m. and go turn on the lights. And then also a lot of people were very concerned not only about privacy, but also about security. We got a lot of questions about, I don't want my data to be tracked even more than it already is. But we also got concerns about identity theft and like, no way am I uploading my ID to some weird website or something like that. And sure, we had a simulated website that we called Age Guardian, so we were appearing to be just some random age verifier, and maybe that's different if you're Google.
Yeah.
But also, if you're Google, that also is then gonna just drive everybody into one big one-stop shop for everything, which has other issues. So it's a mix. I don't know.
Well, I would just say I think what Sarah described is the incidental burden, and that Paxton found was acceptable. I think ultimately the biggest thing that's been transformative on the age verification front in the last 10 years is that we're not just doing IDs anymore. I don't dispute your numbers at all. It's likely that ID would be something that a lot of people are averse to doing. But having a full range of options where we're talking about biometrics, private transactional, public transactional data, I think as the technology evolves, we certainly are capable of doing this. And also, it's important that when you look at this polling, American Principles Project conducted one a couple years ago, even when you let people know that this is something that will have an incidental burden, people are still largely supportive of age verification. And so certainly this is something we have to wrestle with as we're policymaking. Privacy obviously is something we have to wrestle with, but I think that's baked into the cake of the issue.
And so I take some similar things. I think it's very important, obviously, to have an option that's not government ID. I don't think anyone wants like a large third-party server collecting a bunch of government IDs, though I know this has happened. I think the fact that 85% of people were willing to give their email address and go through some sort of commercial transaction, and this is still a newer thing that people aren't used to, I think sounds pretty good to me. And the fact that you feel a little uncomfortable, I guess I also would prefer not to have to give my ID to buy alcohol, or maybe now I'm like excited if they ask for it, but we still do these things even if we don't always want to. Common Sense actually has a new poll out today where they asked adults in America, do you want age verification, age assurance on different types of sites? And a majority want them on social media, and they want them for like AI companions and chatbots. I feel like people do see a problem, and it's not just parents, it's adults see a problem and they want some form of protection, but they also want it to be privacy protective. They don't want to hand over their ID, and they want something that's simple, because the more friction, as you said, like this is everything on the internet, right? Why do we want privacy protective defaults? Because the more friction, people won't do it.
Jessica?
I think that people say a lot of things. I think they're like, yeah, protect kids, yeah. And then the minute they have to deal with, I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can do this. And I think the technology is something supporters that say it's gonna get better, it's gonna get better. And I do think it's gonna get better. That leaves aside the question of whether it's constitutional or a good idea, but it will get better. But also, like, the infrastructure that's being built into regulatory schemes right now means that the little annoying thing that pops up for GDPR, like privacy, you just ignore it and blow through it. If age verification worked like it should, if it was working, you have to do that, or you can't go into that site. I think if people realize what this really meant for just roaming the internet free and clear, I think there would be a different calculation about how inconvenient, how uncomfortable they would be, how annoying they could be. And there's these zero knowledge proofs, and they're just gonna give away a token. That's fine, that again improves it. It might improve the ease of this, and you might be giving away less information to every single site you visit, but there's still a trusted verifier there. So you're just putting your private information in one place instead of a bunch of places. Now, on one hand, that's good. On the other hand, it's a much bigger target on that trusted person's database to be hacked or to be perhaps pressed on by government to turn over some things you'd rather not. There still has to be someone in the system verifying. So I think that technology can make it easier and make it less friction, but I don't think it gets rid of the bottom line of like, and I think some other, who knows what, I don't know anything about polling, some amount of Americans are just uncomfortable having to exchange their personal information for access to speech. It's not alcohol, it's not drugs, it's speech. And I think the incidental inconvenience, like we've seen in the Paxton case where it's pornography, that's a different category of speech. For kids, it's not protected. For adults, it is. Perhaps that changes the calculus. But we're talking about like just things you go onto all the time. And I guess with the next generation, they would be used to that exchange everywhere. And I guess eventually, like, I would get used to it. And we could all get used to it that when you went into the grocery store, you had to show your ID because there's a wine section in back. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So I think there's always going to be people who are more or less comfortable. That's fine. You can always make the technology better. But I think the question is like, just to be honest about it and say there's trade-offs. If you think it's going to help kids more than it's going to endanger people's privacy, security, and convenience and free expression, we can have that conversation. But you're never going to out-tech your way into like, oh, it's perfect now. Privacy's perfect. Every kid is like outside lifting weights spontaneously, interacting with friends. There's trade-offs. And if people started encountering what I think it would probably look like, they might be more uncomfortable than they say they are.
I'll just say really quick, Jessica, I think we have that right now in grocery stores, actually. I was at
Well, to
grocery-
check out, you have to.
I was at the grocery store
but not when you
yesterday,
walk in
getting
the door.
a 24-pack of Miller Lite for the big game. And
Right.
a lady came over and was like, hey, like, I need to see your ID to get that. I don't have to pay that or show my ID when I enter
Right.
the grocery store. And I think this is a very similar thing where when you're talking about actual content or you're talking about companies contracting with minors, this is where we want age verification to be. Obviously, we want it to be
But the problem is when
less
you want it for kids, you want it from me. And I want to walk in the grocery store and not have to show my ID until I try to buy a bottle of wine, which, by the way, is different because wine is a physical substance. And this is speech, which enjoins in a whole different set of protections. But the point is just, where is the ID check? The ID check is on everyone who walks in the store at the front of the door? Or is it on, like, when a 15-year-old tries to walk up and buy a bottle of wine? I like it where it is, and I
would
don't want the
encourage you
whole
guys-
internet age-gated for me.
I would encourage you guys to make this political argument because right now the numbers on this are very favorable towards age verification, and the Supreme Court is articulated pretty aggressively in Paxton that there's an opening here to protect kids online. And what you're speculating is that eventually people will get mad about this. Well, let's see. And let's see what politicians feel about it. Because right now I think they're pretty confident that the incidental trade-off here of protecting kids from porn or predators or all these different things is more important than feeling a little uneasy about walking into the grocery store and paying for beer.
I do want to comment on the privacy and security aspects of the online situation being different than the offline situation, because I think one very big difference is if I go and show my ID to someone at the store, one person saw that, probably they don't have a photographic memory, probably they didn't write it down in some long log that's getting traded around or something like that, probably they didn't store an identifier. Even if they deleted my name and the identifying information off of that, they probably didn't store some number that could be used to track me across multiple different things that I'm going and buying. But that is the norm online, and that is the norm even with these systems that require delete all the personally identifying information after the access is granted. We're still keeping all of the network logs. We're still keeping, oftentimes people will keep like a hash, so like a number that sort of is attached to the ID, even if they're not keeping the ID number or the name or something like that itself. And that really does create something that I think is very different than the offline situation.
Grocery stores are doing the same thing. If you want to get a deal at Wegmans and, you want the $1 off, you have to put your phone number in and they're attracted.
But if you don't,
That's a choice, but you're paying.
I also don't like that either, but whatever.
Well, phone numbers are a little different than birthdays, IDs, stuff like that.
Change your phone number. You can't change your ID.
Or just use your partner's phone number, use your mom's phone number. But I did want to ask, speaking about the Paxton decision, the recent Supreme Court decision that came down in June, that was sort of a targeted, limited decision. They didn't apply the full scrutiny. So I would love to sort of get everyone's take on what that ruling means for what the path looks like going forward on these issues. We can start with you, Jessica.
I don't think we know yet. I mean, I think there is a world in which John's version of like, it's on is possible. Maybe the court decides we're done with all this precedent we have. Ashcroft is over and we're on to a brave new world. I don't predict what the Supreme Court is going to do. I find that to be a safe place to be. But I think that particular decision in Paxton is a little different because it deals with kids and pornography in a situation where that's not protected speech for kids, but it is protected speech. And that makes it a little different than just saying we're going to age gate the whole internet or every app through the app stores or whatever. That's a little different because we're not dealing with a majority of speech that's less protected or not protected for this group. I think that when you read that decision, it's hard to not be struck by like they wanted to uphold this law, the majority did. And they found a way to get there. You can have a discussion about how that, the great legal minds can debate.
Yeah.
But I think that not applying a lot of the precedents in Ashcroft and not applying 4 or 5 different pretty good precedents for using strict scrutiny was a real surprise to the free speech legal community. Whether or not they go back to that strict scrutiny when it's speech that's more broad and not just in this narrow category, I don't know. But I think we'll end up finding out if you pass this kind of legislation, that's where that stuff eventually ends up.
We don't know what's going to happen following Paxton. It is certainly not hurtful to efforts to age verify and have age assurance across the internet for things besides pornography. I don't view everything that happens online as speech. There's a lot of products where kids are playing and where they're spending time, and we have product safety regulations and product safety rules, and that laws targeting product features or laws requiring sort of more privacy protective defaults could deserve a lesser level of constitutional scrutiny. Or if everything is speech, then we take it too far. We can't have any protections for kids online, and I don't think that's what anyone wants, and I don't think that's how we need to read the Constitution. But yes, we'll see with app stores, chatbots, privacy, all different reasons for age assurance. They all might have different answers.
To Jessica's point, I'm probably not super objective observer of Paxton here, but I appreciate that everyone's basically saying we can't know. This is where I think a lot of these legal experts should go, because reality is things are changing. Obviously Roe was overturned. We have the Paxton ruling. Apparently Oklahoma is not even a state anymore. There's a lot going on at the Supreme Court. But I'll just say, in the meantime, legislators should stop trying to be constitutional scholars. Obviously, write legislation in a way that you think can comport to precedent, that can survive scrutiny. But this is what the states and what Congress are for. It's to be laboratories of democracy. And the judicial, I think sometimes we work backwards. We're always talking about what's constitutional, what's not. We don't know. That's what the court is for. That's what the judicial branch is for. And so I would encourage lawmakers to legislate to their heart's content.
You recently left the FTC, and Chairman Ferguson has focused on kids' online safety issues and other issues related to kids. I mean, would you say, in your view, it is the view of the Trump administration that they're pro-age verification, they want to see these laws get passed, and it's an important part of the agenda?
I think the administration's looking at all these laws and considering what the best approach would be. Obviously, kid safety is something the president has truthed about. But going forward, the big decision is what is going to be the approach? What is the bill that can pass Congress that the president would be willing to sign? And more age verification is a part of that conversation, both obviously at the website level, but also the App Store level. Also, possibly, we've talked a lot about AI. The AI level is something like the GUARD Act that Josh Hawley has introduced, a possible solution to protect kids there, and actually maybe in the company's interests for protecting them from crazy liability. I think that's something that everyone's still trying to figure out, but that is being discussed in negotiations right now. And certainly as we talk about the AI moratorium and things like that, I think you'll hear more about it.
I do want to ask everyone about AI, but since we have such interesting opposite perspectives here, I did want to ask you, John, is there anything from a constitutional free speech perspective that would give you pause when it comes to applying these sorts of policies? Any lines you would draw, like that sort of law would go too far, that would trample on First Amendment rights? Like, how do you sort of think about that?
Well, I've been an advocate in the past against online censorship on social media platforms. I think obviously the First Amendment is the best part of the Constitution. I think we all stand on that. It's a question of whether these laws trample on it or whether they satisfy it. And ultimately, when you're talking about obscene content, companies contracting with minors, circumventing parental rights, I think these are issues that aren't First Amendment issues.
What do you mean contracting with minors?
For example, with the App Store bill, I think the big question there is contract law, not necessarily First Amendment rights. Can Google have an agreement with a 13-year-old without the parents knowing? Can Google be providing
It's a user agreement, you mean?
user agreements, providing contracts? There's a lot of concern there, especially among parents, that they're not part of that process, and I think they want to be.
Before we move on to AI, any other thoughts on sort of guiding principles, First Amendment, free speech principles you think about when you approach these policies?
I'm a maximizer. I'm a First Amendment maximizer. I think it's a slippery slope. I think that if you kind of watch where these efforts have gone, it's a duck and weave kind of thing. NetChoice has had 8 injunctions on the laboratories of democracy attempts, which, yeah, I mean, in some ways, of course, that's right. You try different things, but at the same time, how much taxpayer money and time are you going to waste getting told it's probably not constitutional? And then the next state passes, and then the next state, and it's just like, you could pick one state and let them try it, see if you can do it. I mean, we're spending a lot of time here in the court for things that are, there's a consensus, right? And Paxton is the exception, but Paxton is very different. It has different facts. It's a different thing. So you have 8 district courts that have in some way said this isn't going to work. And so then that wears off. So then you try like, oh, it's a contract law. Kids can't make contracts. Kids make contracts all the time. If you're 15 years old, you can go get a job. That's a contract. Now, they're voidable, but they're not void until they're voidable for some reason. So this idea that there's this like blanket prohibition on anyone 18 ever entering into any kind of contract. If you work your summers and you buy a car and you go buy a car, you sign that contract. It's not like it is for adults, but it's not non-existent to the point where we can just say, oh, there's terms of service that, by the way, no one reads. That just brings down the whole system. I mean, I don't know if I really buy that.
Anyone else?
So California's SB 976 addictive feeds prohibition has largely been upheld right now. The Ninth Circuit withstood NetChoice's challenge and is now being challenged, though interestingly, not so much on the age assurance parts by individual companies. So there are some successes outside of the pornography context for lawmakers trying to protect kids. New York is coming up with rules that should be finalized within the next year that will be the most detailed we have in the US about how you can conduct privacy protective age assurance, and they've done a lot of rulemaking and stakeholder discussions. So I think we're starting to see some things that are sticking, and we're moving into the practical and not just the theoretical.
I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to comment on the constitutional part of it.
Me neither.
There we go. But to your point of privacy preserving age verification, I think, first of all, that seems like a baseline to me. That shouldn't even be the North Star that we're going to. That should be the starting point. And some of these methods that we have now, so working on things like selectively disclosing individual attributes like age and the zero knowledge proof approach, again, should be the starting point and not the finish line. And there are these other things to worry about, but I think that would be a lot better than what we seem to be headed for, which is just sending everything around all the time. And also giving people, to the extent possible, the choice of which one they want to use and which one they want to trust would also be really helpful. We saw many people in our survey who were deeply skeptical of any kind of government ID app, which I think is like a good, hearty American tradition. But we also saw plenty of people who said, I would way rather have a government option than big tech. I think both of those things are very reasonable things to want.
I did want to ask, I mean, we've been having this debate over children's safety long before AI chatbots were everywhere. So how does that change the conversation for you guys? How does it color or not color the way you think and talk about these things?
I don't think it's much of a paradigm shift for me. A lot of these things that are being proposed that are government regulations are already available as parental tools. First of all, I have to say it every time because I'm a parent. I know it's annoying to play that card. Your greatest parental tool is no. No, I will not spend $900 buying your phone. You are not getting a phone at all. You are getting a flip phone. You are getting a dumb phone. You will turn your phone into me during dinner and overnight hours. These are all options. I know, I live them in my home. They're all there. But on top of that, at every level of the stack, there are parental controls that accomplish all of these goals and do not raise constitutional concerns. They do not sweep up a bunch of adult free speech in the process of the noble goal of protecting children. And what they will tell you is, yeah, but people don't use them. One thing is, it's new. Give us a minute. We're parents. We're tired. I have laundry. What are we having for dinner tonight? I'm getting to it. I use them, but I think more and more people will as they get better and better. 2, economists call that a revealed preference, is another possible explanation. That when you call someone and ask them, what are you worried about? I'm really worried about this. I'm not actually worried enough to spend 15 minutes setting up parental controls. So I think that's a question that comes up too. I set mine out of the box, and for the most part, I got to look in on some things. That's all I need to do. Every family is going to be different. There's a lot of options. And I think for AI chatbots, none of those calculations really change because the technology changes. The principles are the same, that I want parents to be in control, but a lot of the government stuff doesn't do that. Like Virginia, my kids can only be on social media for an hour. Really? My 17-year-old kid or my 12-year-old kid? That's crazy. I don't want to deal with that. But I had to be like, and undo and go back to my parental controls and my settings. So I think for me with AI chatbots, it's going to be much the same. If you come from it from a point of principle, the technology changes, but the principles, I think, largely don't.
I think I would agree that I see AI as kind of an evolution of like past issues that we've dealt with, social media and other questions. It exacerbates a lot of the privacy issues. Disagree that it takes 15 minutes to set up parental
Mine did. On my Apple iPhone for both my kids.
You guys can talk about that later.
It's taken a couple hours for Apple, and it's taken many hours for like Roblox or Minecraft.
I don't let my kids play Roblox.
Okay, well, we could just opt out of technology altogether. But I think it's very hard for parents, and making defaults easier for them would be good. And I don't think parental control tools on the market right now would accomplish like all of the algorithmic targeting and privacy protective goals that I see in some legislation and in sense supports.
I think policymakers are really wrestling with this. It's a lot easier when we're talking about like obscene as to minors content, as Jessica mentioned. I think if a chatbot becomes a sex bot to a kid, that's probably an issue. What's really challenging, and I've heard this a lot from lawmakers, is what do you do when the speech is clearly First Amendment protected, or at least in that zone? That's tough. When you're talking about if an adult would tell a child who was confessing suicide ideation, hey, your noose looks really nice, that adult would be liable. And so it's a real question, okay, so how are we going to treat these AI chatbots? And also, I think the companies want to navigate that. I don't think they want unlimited liability on this. And it's going to be really important in the next year and going forward for Congress to include handling AI chatbots as part of the larger scope.
I don't have much to add on AI chatbots specifically, but AI is certainly getting integrated into more and more things. And I think chatbots are this year in browsers, operating systems. AI is definitely entering more and more spaces, and it's something we're going to have to figure out how to deal with as we go.
Might have to do another study. Tell us
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yes. I do want to leave these last 12 minutes or so for audience questions. Right here.
Patrick Hedger with NetChoice. Question about,
For your
we're talking about lots of different types of technology. I've been testifying on these issues before, and I've read some of these bills. Jessica, maybe you could back me up here. Isn't it not the case that when even some of the more privacy protective technologies fail, the default is the government ID in the review process?
Yeah, and I also, this is not like a principled statement, I find the biometric stuff super creepy too. Like, I don't know where all that's going, and like, it's not my driver's license, it's a retinal scan. Like, I just don't want to, and I'm not everyone, but I'm just saying, I think that, again, choices are better, less friction is better. You can improve these things, but there's at a point where for some people, they're just going to be like, that's no, like, it's weird, no.
Amanda Lenhard. I'm with the Joan Gans Cooney Center, but what I'm going to say is not representing them. So I actually have so many questions for the panel. But first, I would really love for everyone to talk a little bit more about the First Amendment stuff and talk to me about where their speech is happening and whether or not a chatbot is a thing that can have intent to speak. So that's question number one, which I'd love to hear discussed. The other thing I really want to bring up, so I'm a researcher and I spend a lot of time talking to families and parents. And there's just so many parents out in the world who have great intentions and who have very low capabilities for being able to manage these kinds of things, whether it's because they work 3 jobs and they have a bunch of kids, whether it's because they have a child who's really reactive and works around this. I'm currently talking to people with ADHD and kids with ADHD. Let me tell you, parents who are freaked out, talk to those guys. So I would love to hear from the panel. What do you think is your ideal age assurance solution? And you can't pick parents.
And there's a lot of questions, so let's keep these all brief, Axio style.
I think I was taken out of that one.
Because you have no idea. Yours is.
Well, mine is parent. I have a great
parent.
idea.
It is
But
parent. Okay.
that has been eliminated from, so I'm gonna, in
Fair
the
enough.
interest of time, just.
Fair enough. I guess if I had to pick one thing, it would be where assurance happens on the device and there's zero knowledge proofs and privacy protection we're moving towards. Is that the question?
Okay. Device level age assurance. Okay.
I'd probably concur with that. I will say we had at the FTC Ian Corby with the Age Verification Providers Association talking at length about all the different ways they're doing it, and actually that new technologies are arising every day. I saw one where you can like wave your hand and that somehow, I don't know how, but it can figure out what your age is. So I think it's important with the laws to keep it open to a range of options because I think that'll help protect more kids.
To a first approximation, I think letting people choose which thing they want to put their particular trust in is better than the alternative. Once again, I will say that I think the things like a selective disclosure and the zero knowledge proof approach are like a starting point, not a finish line.
Okay. Next question.
Eric Rescorla, Knight George Institute, though not speaking for them, as I think we're all supposed to say. I guess first a statement and then a question. The statement is none of these individual signals are good enough. Every individual signal has very large false reject rates. And so so any signal you use will simply have an unacceptable false reject rate. The question then is, what do you consider an acceptable overall false reject rate for the system? That is, what fraction of people who are eligible to use the system do you consider acceptable to be rejected and not have any real way to use it?
I think that's a really good question. I mean, this is one of the criticisms of the website level age verification laws. It's a reasonable criticism is, well, can a kid just get a VPN and go around it?
other way around, by the way. I mean, what fraction of adults get rejected if you consider acceptable?
Oh man, that's a good question.
It will be someone.
I think that this is why you have a suite of options, right? If you have only one option for age verification, you have a potential for a higher number. Hopefully there's multiple ways, but you want to maintain it being an incidental burden.
I guess I would also say, what are we using the age verification for? If it's to provide you higher privacy protections, then I really don't care how many adults accidentally get them.
There is going to be the person who doesn't have an ID, doesn't want an ID, can't get one for whatever reason, who looks really young, who really likes watching Bluey videos or something like this, right? There will be somebody who, can't use any of these ways. And what are we talking about access to? And I think that's a very good question of how many are we willing to say, nope, can't be done. Maybe we'll keep looking for more.
Okay. Yes, you in the back row. Yeah.
This panel's talked a lot about parents and parental rights. I realize under US law, kids really don't have any rights, but let's put that aside for a minute. What responsibility do we have towards kids to let them use the internet, access content, and how do you balance a child that at 18 will suddenly have either no protections or very limited protections? And what's the best way to deal with that?
So Common Sensus historically has been supportive more of features-based and specific applications of age assurance and protecting kids, and a kind of a training wheels approach that we see in COPPA 2.0, like you're under 13, your parent makes some decisions, you're under 16 or 17 or 18, the teen makes some supported decisions, because it probably shouldn't just be a cliff, and I think that's a good way. And there is a question of if you're not allowed to do anything at all, or be online at all, or be on social media at all, or talk to AI at all, and then at a certain age, everything's open to you, I think that could be really scary and a very vulnerable time for that person.
I would just say I think the internet literacy question is totally in the domain of the parent. And I think most Americans probably agree with that as a parent, you should be guiding your kid how to use the internet and what type of speech with adults is appropriate and what sites to avoid and that sort of thing. And I'm a social conservative. I know I'm probably the minority here, but that's generally where I'm coming from.
Okay, yes. The blue tie.
Steve Del Bianco with NetChoice. Ashley and Jessica have really done their best to try to focus on the First Amendment. And despite your efforts, we're leaving this audience with the impression that the First Amendment is just like buying wine. The First Amendment is right to see and say. There is no constitutional right to buy wine, which is why IDs are appropriate and permissible under the law. So I think that there's a chance that we've mischaracterized the Paxton ruling. The Paxton ruling was only about content that is unlawful for minors. It expressly did not deal with content that is lawful for minors and for all of us at all ages. So this discussion, I mean, Ashley keeps trying to return you to the First Amendment. You can't just stomp on it. The question earlier about whether the companies themselves, whether it's speech when a chatbot is speaking to you. Well, I know this. The First Amendment says that this 16-year-old using the chatbot is expressing her speech. And what she sees and what she says are protected by the First Amendment.
Do you have a question, Steve?
Ashley, what can you do to close this off with some reaction to what the First Amendment really limits in terms of what John and others really want to do?
I'm not going to do that, but we are going to let other people ask questions if they have them. Yes, with the glasses. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Jake Kalina with GeoComply. My question is about the fragmented regulatory environment at the state level and how can we have effective state laws if VPNs enable people in restricted jurisdictions to say they're in a non-restricted jurisdiction? And can you have an effective state-by-state framework with that type of location obfuscation? So do states need to think about location verification? We've seen some interesting approaches in Indiana with the AG lawsuit down there. And if not, what's the legislative or legal solution?
Well, I'll just say really quick, I'm a fan of doing this at the federal level, so I think that would be the way to solve for this. I will say we have gambling, sports gambling proliferation across the country, and sports apps are figuring out how to deal with that. And so I think it would be very similar here.
And I think also like the New York regulations try to address and set some parameters around circumvention and VPN use. I will say that in the UK, the Online Safety Act requires some age assurance online, and a couple of different nonprofits have done studies that did not show a huge spike in VPN usage after that law came into effect, different than I think what we've heard reported in terms of states that have put in requirements for pornography access.
And there's also been suggestions in England to outlaw VPNs. So I think from that we can see the slippery slope taking shape. And I think that generally what we see over there and what we see in Australia, where there has been a huge spike in VPN use, and those Australian kids, by the way, are awesome. They're buying face masks off Temu and verifying their identities online. Little rebels for liberty, and I'm all for it. We do see a spike there. And I think that's what you see when it's state by state. But again, figuring out how to like repress harder, I think gets us kind of rushing past the point of like, these laws are unconstitutional, the ones that have been stayed so far. So I think the next step is like, what are you gonna do, outlaw VPNs? Or are you gonna do age verification for VPNs? I mean, that's like the funniest thing ever, right?
We are out of time, but thank you for such a lively debate. Clearly, we don't have any clear solutions here, and there's a lot of different feelings and thoughts on this topic, and it'll continue to be interesting. Hope to keep in touch with you all, and thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.